The Netherlands, 1938. The AVRO tournament, 8 of the finest players alive gathered to decide who would challenge for the world crown. On one side of the board, Mikhail Botvinnik of the Soviet Union, a champion still in the making. On the other, Raul Capablanca of Cuba, once king of the chess world, famous for a simplicity that looked like water finding its way downhill. If a quiet game like this is how you'd like to fall asleep, take a moment to subscribe. There's a new one each week. Capablanca had held the world title years before and lost it. This was one of his last great stages. Botvinnik, the younger man, was hungry, methodical, precise. The mind that would soon reshape Soviet chess. The game they played that day is remembered by many as a perfect masterpiece. It grew from a calm, careful opening called the Nimzo-Indian Defense, the sort of position where nothing seems to be happening. And then, deep in the game, a single move that people still speak of with wonder. White would offer up a bishop for nothing, not to win it back, but to lure the black queen far away from her king. With the queen drawn off to the edge of the world, a lone pawn would begin its long walk toward the far side. So let your eyes close now and let the board take shape in the dark, 64 squares, the pieces waiting, the story about to begin. So let the board take shape in the dark. 2 armies, still whole, the pieces waiting in their ranks. White moves first. A pawn steps quietly to d4. Black answers by lifting the king's knight to f6, eyeing the center from a distance. White widens the front. The c-pawn advances to c4. Black opens a small door for the bishop, a pawn to e6. This is the oldest kind of conversation. A slow build, each side claiming a little more of the middle. White brings a knight out to c3, adding weight to the squares in the center. And now black plays the move that gives this whole opening its name. The dark bishop slides all the way to b4 and pins the knight on c3 against the king behind it. This is the Nimzo-Indian. Black does not rush to build pawns in the center. Instead, he tangles white's pieces and waits. White answers softly, a pawn to e3, opening the light bishop's path. Black at last plants a pawn in the middle, to d5, meeting steel with steel. Now white asks the pinning bishop a plain question. A pawn creeps to a3. Stay or go? The bishop on b4 must decide. Black takes. The bishop captures on c3, and it lands with check against the white king. A small trade with a lasting price. Black gives up his dark squared bishop for the knight. White recaptures the only way. The b-pawn takes back on c3. And look at what has appeared. White's pawns on c3 and c4 stand doubled, one in front of the other. That is the bargain of this line. Black has handed white 2 bishops and in return crippled white's pawns on the queen side. One player will spend the game trying to make those bishops sing, the other to keep them mute. Black strikes at the base now, a pawn to c5, leaning on the white center. White eases the tension. The c-pawn captures on d5. Black recaptures with the e-pawn back onto d5, keeping a broad pawn in the middle. White develops the light bishop to d3, aiming across the board toward black's king to be. Black castles. The king tucks away to g8, the rook swinging in beside it. White has a subtler path for the other knight. It goes not to f3, but quietly to e2. From e2 the knight leaves the f-pawn free to advance later. Botvinnik is already thinking of a pawn storm. Black makes a little room, a pawn to b6, preparing to fianchetto his light bishop. White castles as well, the king slipping to g1, both monarchs now safe in their corners. Black brings his bishop out along the diagonal, all the way to a6. It stares straight at White's good bishop on d3, offering a trade. And White accepts. The bishop captures on a6. Black recaptures with the knight from b8, the knight arriving on a6, off at the edge of the board. One pair of bishops gone. White still holds the survivor, the dark one, not yet developed. And here it comes. White fianchettos that last bishop to b2. From b2 it looks down the long diagonal, past its own doubled pawns, toward Black's kingside. Remember that line. It will matter more than anything else on the board. Black centralizes his queen to d7, connecting the rooks. White gains space on the flank, the pawn to a4, fixing the queenside. Let the whole board settle in your mind for a moment. Both kings sit in their castled homes on g1 and g8. White's pawns run in a strange shape doubled on c3 and c4, with a 3 and d4 beside them, and the kingside pawns still at home. The white bishop on b2 aims at the far corner. The queen watches from near the center, the rooks ready to swing across. Black is solid and neat. A pawn on d5, a knight loose on a6, the queen on d7, and a fine outpost square waiting on c4. It is a quiet position, the kind where nothing seems to be happening and everything is being decided. Black now brings his rook to the center file, the king's rook to e8. White lifts the queen to d3, a flexible perch, watching both wings. And Black makes a committal choice. The c-pawn pushes to c4. It gains space and it strikes the white queen, but listen to what it gives away. By fixing the pawn on c4, Black releases the tension against d4. White's center is no longer under pressure. Now Botvinnik can turn his whole mind to one plan. Build in the center, then break with the pawns and open lines toward the black king. The white queen steps aside to c2, unhurried, keeping an eye on the coming e-pawn advance. Black begins a long journey with his edge knight. From a6 it retreats to b8. It looks backward, almost shy, but the knight is only gathering itself to reach a better square. White brings the last rook into the game, from a1 over to e1, both rooks now on the central files. Black's knight continues its tour, out again to c6, reaching toward the good squares. White repositions the knight from e2, hopping to g3, closer to the kingside and eyeing the squares in front of Black's king. Now Black sends the knight onward to a5. Here a colder, modern eye pauses. This is a small slip. The knight is heading for the fine hole on b3, true. But it is drifting to the rim, far from the king it may soon need to defend. Better, it is now thought, was to double the rooks, bringing the other rook to b8 and pressing on the half-open file. That would have kept the pieces coiled and ready. Instead, the knight wanders off to the edge, and the kingside grows a shade lonelier. White prepares the great advance, a modest pawn to f3, bracing the center before the storm. Black plants the knight on its target, to b3, deep in White's camp. It forks nothing, wins nothing yet. It simply sits there, proud and immovable, a splinter in White's position. But a knight on b3 is a knight not guarding g7. Keep that thought. And now the center breaks open. White pushes the pawn to e4. The floodgate lifts. Behind that pawn, the bishop on b2 and the rooks begin to sense open air. Black grabs a pawn while he can. The queen sweeps out and captures on a4, far away on the queenside. A pawn in hand, but see where the black queen now stands, out on the rim at a4, a whole world away from her king. This is the quiet trade at the heart of the game. Black wins a pawn on one wing. White gets a free hand on the other. White presses forward. The pawn rolls on to e5. It seizes space and it kicks the black knight on f6, which had been the last real guardian of the kingside. Black retreats that knight to d7, the only good square left for it. And now feel the shape of the whole board, because everything is leaning one way. White's pawns on d4 and e5 form a wide wedge, a rolling front pointed at the black king. Behind them, the bishop on b2 glares down the long diagonal, the queen sits on c2, and both rooks stand on the central files waiting. And black? His queen is off on a4, one knight is buried on b3, the other has just backed up to d7. Three of his best pieces are on the wrong side of the board, and the king on g8 is beginning to feel the draft. The pawns have not clashed yet. The bishop has not struck. Everything is still coiled, still gathering. And into that stillness, Botvinnik is about to reach for an idea that will be remembered for as long as the game is played. White has the move, and the white queen slides quietly back to f2. It looks modest, a queen tucked behind her own pawns, watching. But she is eyeing the long dark diagonal now, the one that runs toward the black king. Capablanca answers by pushing the pawn to g6, giving his king a window of air. Botvinnik pushes the f-pawn to f4, thickening his wall in the center. And black strikes back in kind. The f-pawn steps up to f5. Modern analysis calls this the best try. Black wants to lock the position and dam the flood. White has a passed pawn sitting on e5, and beside it, the chance to take in passing. He takes. The e-pawn captures on f6, appearing suddenly next to black's king. The knight comes across from d7 and recaptures on f6. So a black knight now stands guard right in front of its king on f6. Remember that night. Later, everything will turn on it. White pushes again, the f-pawn to f5, and the pawns clench together. The e-file has opened, and both sides feel it. Black trades the first pair of rooks, taking on e1. White recaptures on e1, his last rook now owning the open file. Capablanca swings his other rook over to e8, contesting the line. Let the board settle in your mind for a moment. White's king rests on g1, behind 2 pawns. Black's king sits on g8, behind 3. Down the e-file, the 2 rooks face each other nose to nose. Far away, on the queen side, the black queen stands on a4, off on her own adventure. That distance, the queen way out on the edge, is the quiet crack that will decide the game. Now, white does something bold. The rook plunges forward to e6. It stands right in front of the black king, offered up, daring the capture. Capablanca takes it. The rook captures on e6, and white recaptures with the pawn, so a white pawn now sits on e6. A tiny pawn, but only 2 steps from becoming a queen. Black's king shuffles to g7, coming out to keep an eye on it. The white queen lifts to f4, out into the open at last. She looks down the board toward the dark squares around that king. Capablanca hurries his queen all the way home, back to e8, to blockade the pawn. Here white has a choice, and modern eyes see a cleaner one. He plays the queen to e5 into the center, pinning his hopes on the dark diagonal. It is called a small inaccuracy. A check first, the queen to c7, was sharper. That check would have driven the king and kept every idea alive with more bite. Rook e5 is still menacing, and now the pressure passes to black. Capablanca offers to trade queens, stepping his queen to e7. It feels safe. Swap the queens, and white's attack has no engine to run on. This is the mistake. The one slip in a beautifully defended game. A colder, modern eye wanted the quiet h5 instead, keeping the queens on and the king breathing. Because now white is not obliged to trade at all. Picture the whole board once more and hold it still. White's queen on e5, his knight on g3, his bishop asleep on b2. A white pawn on e6, one square from glory, but blockaded by the queen on e7. The black king on g7. In front of it, the knight on f6. Beside it, pawns on g6 and h7. And still, far out on a3. No, on e7 now. The queen has come back, but she came back a step too slow. Everything hangs on whether white can break the wall in front of that king. And now comes the move this game is remembered for. Botvinnik moves his sleeping bishop from b2 all the way to a3. The bishop to a3. It attacks the black queen on e7 along the diagonal. Take a slow breath and see what he has really done. He has offered the bishop for free and asked the black queen to travel to the far corner to take it. If black declines and trades queens on e5, that pawn on e6 simply marches in and queens. So the queen must take. She captures the bishop on a3 step. And in that instant she is banished, pinned to the queenside a whole world away from her king. That was the whole point, not to win the bishop, to lose the black queen down a well. Now the king on g7 stands almost alone, and white strikes the second blow. The knight leaps from g3 to h5 check. A second piece thrown on the fire, landing on h5 beside the enemy king. It attacks nothing safely. It is pure offering. Take me and open your own door. If the king runs instead, the queen crashes to g5 and mates in the fresh air. So Capablanca captures. The g-pawn takes the knight on h5. And with that capture, the shelter in front of the king is torn wide open. The white queen swings to g5 check. The king cannot go to h8 or f7 for long. It steps aside to f8. Now the queen takes the knight on f6 with check. That is the guardian gone, the knight that stood in front of the king, swept away. The king slips back to g8, the only square. And here the little pawn finally walks, from e6 to e7. One step from a new queen, and the black queen still stranded far away on a3. This is the race now. Black must check and never stop, or the pawn becomes a queen, and it is over. So Capablanca begins the only music left to him, a stream of checks. The queen swings in from a3 to c1, check. Botvinnik's king steps calmly to f2. The queen follows to c2, check. The king climbs to g3. The queen to d3, check. And the king keeps walking up to h4. See it, the white king strolling up the board, into the open, into the storm of checks. It looks reckless. It is exact. Each square is the one safe square. The queen checks again from e4, and the king simply takes the loose pawn on h5. The king captures on h5, sheltering behind the very pawn black gave up moves ago. The queen chases to e2, check. The king drops back to h4. The queen returns to e4, check. Now white has one more quiet resource, and it is decisive. The pawn steps to g4, blocking the check with its own body. The checking line is stopped, and the king has a roof over its head at last. Capablanca tries once more, the queen to e1 check along the diagonal. And the white king rises to h5. Rest your eyes here on that final picture. The white king stands high on h5, sheltered by its own pawn on g4. The pawn on e7 waits one step from crowning. And the black queen down on e1 has almost run out of squares from which to check. One spite check remains, the queen to e5, but the king only climbs on to h6. And there the checks dry up entirely, while the pawn on e7 becomes a queen. A queen black can no longer stop, and a king black can no longer reach. That is the whole design, laid bare at the end. A bishop given, a knight given, both spent to send one queen too far from home. And a small pawn, patient the whole while, walking in through the door they opened. Capablanca, one of the finest defenders who ever lived, looked at it all and laid down his king. Botvinnik had won at the great tournament in the Netherlands in the autumn of 1938. A game remembered ever since simply as his masterpiece. The board is still now, the pieces at rest where they fell. Nothing more to solve, nothing more to guard. Let the picture soften and let it rest. And there the game rests, the last move made, nothing left to answer. Let the pieces stay where they are now, still and quiet on their squares. The board begins to soften at its edges, the lines of light and dark growing dim. The kings, the rooks, the pawns, all of them fading now into the dark. There is nothing more to watch for, nothing more to hold in mind. The moves are all behind us, kept safe, and you can set them down. Whatever the day asks of you, it is finished, and this hour is only yours. The board is gone now, and only the warm dark remains. Sleep well. Good night.